When I first saw her, she was standing beneath the old banyan tree at the edge of the park, sunlight slipping through the leaves and touching her face like a secret. It wasn't her beauty that startled me, it was her eyes. They were green. Not the soft green of moss or the gentle shade of spring leaves, but a deep, luminous green, like the ocean just before a storm. In our small town, where everyone knew everyone, she was new, and new things rarely stayed unnoticed. Her name was Liana. She had moved into the abandoned house at the end of Willow Street, the one children used to dare each other to touch at midnight. The house had peeling white paint, tall, shuttered windows, and a garden that looked like it hadn't been loved in years. Yet, within a week of her arrival, flowers bloomed along the walkway, and the broken fence had been repaired. People talked. They say her mother was a witch. Green eyes like that? Not natural. She doesn't smile much. Small towns have a way of building stories out of silence. I didn't believe any of it, or at least I told myself I didn't. But I couldn't deny the way she made me curious. I started seeing her everywhere. At the library, reading thick novels with worn spines. At the grocery store, carefully picking apples as if each one mattered. Sitting alone at the cafe, stirring her tea long after the sugar had dissolved. She never seemed lonely, just distant. One afternoon, rain poured down without warning. I was running toward the bus stop when I noticed her standing under the awning of a closed bookstore. She wasn't trying to escape the rain, she was watching it. I hesitated before walking over. "Hi," I said, awkwardly. She turned her head slowly, and those green eyes met mine. They were sharper up close, almost unsettling. "Hi," she replied, her voice calm and steady. "You're new here," I added, immediately regretting how obvious that sounded. "Yes." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of rain hitting pavement. "I'm Noah," I said finally. "Liana." Her name sounded softer when she said it. We began talking in small pieces, about the weather, about the town, about the library's terrible closing hours. She didn't laugh much, but when she did, it felt rare and honest. Over the next few weeks, we fell into an unspoken routine. I would find her in the park most evenings, sitting beneath the banyan tree. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. She liked quiet. One day, I gathered the courage to ask what everyone else was too afraid to ask. "Why did you move here?" Her expression shifted, just slightly. "My father grew up here," she said. "He left when he was 18, said this town was too small for his dreams." "And you?" She looked at the horizon, where the sun was slowly sinking. "I came back to see what he ran from." There was something heavy in her words, something unfinished. A week later, rumors intensified. Mrs. Harper claimed her cat hissed every time Liana walked by. Tom from the hardware store swore the temperature dropped whenever she entered. Children whispered that her eyes glowed in the dark. I laughed at the absurdity, but late at night, lying in bed, I found myself wondering. There was something different about her. Not magical, just layered. One evening, I arrived at the park and found her crying. I had never seen her cry before. Her shoulders were trembling, and she didn't notice me until I was standing beside her. "What happened?" I asked softly. She wiped her eyes quickly, as if embarrassed. "My father died last year. Before he passed, he told me he left this town because he felt invisible here, like no one truly saw him." The wind rustled the leaves above us. He wanted to understand what he meant, but now I think I do. What do you mean? She turned toward me, and for the first time, her green eyes didn't seem sharp or mysterious. They seemed tired. People see what they want to see, she said, not what's real. I didn't know how to respond. She stood up suddenly. Walk with me. We walked through Willow Street, past glowing porch lights and quiet houses. When we reached her home, she stopped at the gate. Do my eyes scare you? She asked abruptly. The question caught me off guard. No, I said truthfully. They're just different. She studied my face carefully, as if measuring the honesty in my voice. They were my mother's, she said. She was from Ireland. That's where the color comes from. Genetics. Nothing magical. A small smile touched her lips. But people prefer mystery. It makes life more interesting. Or more cruel, I replied. She nodded. That night, something shifted between us. The rumors didn't stop, but they mattered less. I started sitting with her at the cafe. We worked on homework together at the library. She even laughed more, real laughter that reached her eyes. And slowly, others began to see what I saw. Not a witch, not a storm, just a girl carrying grief and trying to find where she belonged. Months passed, and Willow Street no longer whispered her name with suspicion. The flowers in her garden grew brighter. The house felt warmer. One afternoon, under the banyan tree, she looked at me thoughtfully. You were the first person who didn't ask if I was strange, she said. I shrugged. Everyone's strange. She smiled. Her eyes still looked like the ocean before a storm, but now I realized something. Storms aren't always destructive. Sometimes they clear the sky. And the green-eyed girl wasn't mysterious or cursed. She was simply brave enough to be different in a town that feared difference. As the sun dipped below the trees, she leaned back against the trunk and closed her eyes. For the first time since she arrived, she looked at peace. And in that moment, I understood something too. It wasn't her eyes that made her unforgettable. It was her strength. The strength to stand in a storm of whispers and not disappear. The strength to return to a place that once made her father feel unseen and choose to stay anyway. The strength to let someone truly see her. And maybe that was the real magic all along. Autumn arrived quietly. The leaves turned gold and crimson, covering Willow Street in a soft, crackling carpet. The air grew colder, but Liana seemed warmer somehow, more open, more certain of her place here. People had started greeting her now. Mrs. Harper no longer crossed the street when she saw her. The hardware store owner even offered her a small job organizing shelves on weekends. The whispers hadn't vanished completely, but they had softened into curiosity instead of suspicion. Still, I knew something inside her hadn't fully settled. One evening beneath the banyan tree, she handed me an old leather notebook. My father's, she said. The edges were worn, the pages yellowed with time. I opened it carefully. Inside were sketches of the town, Main Street, the lake, the park. But beside each drawing were notes, beautiful but small, kind but closed, full of life but afraid of difference. He loved this place, she said quietly, but he felt trapped by what people expected him to be. And what did they expect? She hesitated. Normal, predictable, invisible. The word hung between us again. I flipped through more pages. Toward the end, the handwriting grew shakier. If I ever return, I hope I'll be brave enough to stay. He never came back, I said. No, she replied, but I did. For the first time, I realized her move wasn't just about curiosity. It was unfinished business, a promise carried across generations. A few days later, something unexpected happened. The town announced its annual Harvest Festival, an event filled with music, lanterns, and homemade pies. It was the kind of tradition families looked forward to all year. Liana planned to skip it. "I don't really belong in crowds like that," she said when I invited her. "You belong more than you think," I insisted. She looked uncertain. Crowds meant attention, attention meant eyes, and eyes meant judgment. But on the night of the festival, she came. She wore a simple, dark green dress that made her eyes look even brighter beneath the lantern lights. People stared at first, old habits, but no one whispered. Music played near the gazebo. Children ran between booths. The scent of cinnamon and roasted corn filled the air. For a moment, everything felt normal, until the power went out. The lights flickered once, twice, and then darkness swallowed the park. Gasps rose from the crowd. Someone shouted. A child began to cry. In the confusion, I felt Liana's hand grip my sleeve. "It's okay," I said, though I wasn't sure. Then something strange happened. As the town scrambled to relight lanterns, I noticed a faint glow nearby. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't magical in the way stories describe, but Liana's eyes reflected the smallest remaining lights, candles, distant porch lamps, catching and magnifying them in a way that made them visible even in the dark. A little girl near us stopped crying. "Your eyes are pretty," she said softly. Liana blinked, surprised. "They're like little lanterns." And suddenly, the fear dissolved. Someone laughed. Another person lit a candle. Within minutes, dozens of small lights flickered across the park. The darkness no longer felt threatening. It felt intimate, almost beautiful. The power returned shortly after, but something had shifted again. This time, not just in Liana, but in everyone else. They had seen her in the dark, and nothing terrible had happened. The next morning, Willow Street buzzed with talk, not rumors, but stories. "Did you see how calm she was? She helped that little girl. Her eyes really are striking." But this time, the tone carried admiration instead of suspicion. Liana didn't mention it, but I could tell it mattered. Later that week, she made a decision. She organized a small art exhibit at the community center using her father's sketches. She added her own paintings beside them. Same streets, same buildings, but brighter, wider, filled with color. The exhibit was called Seen. People came out of curiosity. They stayed out of reflection. Beside one painting of Willow Street at sunset, she wrote, "Being different does not make you dangerous. It makes you visible." I watched townspeople read those words slowly. Some nodded, some looked thoughtful. A few even looked ashamed. When the evening ended, the mayor approached her. "We're glad you came back," he said sincerely. Liana smiled, not guarded, not distant, just real. "Me too." Winter approached and the banyan tree stood bare against the sky. Yet somehow it felt stronger. We sat beneath it one last time before the first snowfall. "Do you still think people only see what they want to see?" I asked. She considered the question carefully. "I think," she said, "sometimes they just need time to adjust their vision." "And you?" She looked at me with those storm-colored eyes. "I think I'm done trying to hide in other people's expectations." The wind brushed against us, cold but steady. For months, the town had looked at her and seen mystery, danger, difference. Now they saw courage. And I realized something else. Her eyes were never the storm. They were the mirror. They reflected whatever people brought with them, fear or acceptance, suspicion or kindness. And once the town changed what it carried, the reflection changed too. Snow began to fall gently around us. Liana stood, tilting her face toward the sky, catching flakes on her lashes. For the first time since she arrived, she didn't look like someone searching for answers. She looked like someone who had found them. The green-eyed girl hadn't just returned to her father's unfinished story, she had rewritten it, and this time she wasn't invisible, she was seen. Winter settled over the town like a quiet promise. Snow covered Willow Street, softening sharp edges, blurring fences and rooftops into something almost dreamlike. The banyan tree stood bare and patient, its branches stretching toward a pale sky. Liana loved the winter. "It makes everything honest," she said once, watching snow fall outside the cafe window. No bright colors to hide behind, just what is. By now, the town no longer whispered her name. Children waved at her on their way to school. Mrs. Harper had invited her for tea. The arts exhibit, Scene, had been extended another month because so many people kept returning. But peace is never permanent. One afternoon, news spread that a development company from the city planned to buy several old properties, including the house at the end of Willow Street, Liana's house, the abandoned house her father once ran from, the house she had restored with her own hands, the house that had bloomed again. "It's just business," people said. "They're modernizing the area." Modernizing meant tearing down. She received the letter on a Thursday. By Friday evening, I found her standing alone in her garden, staring at the winter bare flowers. "They're offering a lot of money," she said quietly. "You don't have to sell." She exhaled slowly. "It's not that simple." The company argued the house was structurally outdated, unsafe, inefficient. They promised new buildings, new opportunities, new profit. It felt familiar. Small, closed, afraid of difference. Only this time, it wasn't about her eyes. It was about preserving something that didn't fit the town's new image. At the town meeting, people gathered in the community hall, the same hall that once displayed her father's sketches. The developers spoke first, smooth voices, polished promises. Then Liana stood. She didn't bring notes. She didn't raise her voice. She simply spoke. "This house," she began, "was once called abandoned, haunted, useless. People avoided it because it looked different from the rest." A quiet ripple moved through the room. "I moved in anyway." She paused, her green eyes scanning familiar faces. "I restored it, not because it was perfect, but because it had history, because it mattered." She gestured toward the window, where Willow Street lay beneath snow. "This town taught me something. It taught me that fear can disguise itself as progress, that difference can be mistaken for danger." The room fell completely still. "My father left because he felt unseen. I stayed because I believed this town could learn to see." Her voice didn't break. "If you tear down every building that feels old, unusual, or inconvenient, what happens when you start doing that to people?" The words landed. No drama, no storm, just truth. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mrs. Harper stood. "That house isn't unsafe," she said firmly. "My nephew's a contractor. He inspected it last spring. Tom from the hardware store followed. And the gardens brought more visitors to Willow Street than we've had in years." One by one, voices joined. Not loud, but steady. By the end of the night, the council voted to preserve the property as a historical home. The development company withdrew, and something far greater than a house had been saved. That evening, we returned to the banyan tree. Snow crunched under our boots, the air was sharp and cold, but her cheeks were flushed, not from winter, but from something brighter. "You didn't look afraid," I said. "I was," she admitted, "but being afraid doesn't mean staying silent." Her breath formed small clouds in the air. "You know," she added, "when I first came here, I thought I had to prove something, to defend who I was. And now?" She smiled softly. Now I don't feel like I'm fighting the town anymore. I feel like I'm part of it. Above us, the first stars began to appear. For so long, people had seen her as a mystery, then as a question. Now they saw her as something else entirely, a reminder. Spring came early that year. The banyan tree bloomed stronger than ever. Flowers returned to her garden in brighter colors than before, and on the gate of her house she hung a small wooden sign, Willow House, Est restored. Not rebuilt, restored, because that's what she had done, not just to the house, but to the town. On the anniversary of the Harvest Festival blackout, the town held another gathering. Lanterns filled the park again, glowing warmly in the dusk. This time, when the lights flickered for just a second, only a second, no one panicked. Instead, a little girl laughed. "It's okay," she said. "We've got the green-eyed girl." Liana laughed too. Not because she was their light, but because they have finally learned to light their own. As we stood beneath the banyan tree, I looked at her, at the eyes that once seemed like an approaching storm. They were still green, still deep, still striking. But now when people looked into them, they didn't see fear or mystery. They saw reflection of growth, of courage, of change. And I understood something fully at last. The real magic was never in the color of her eyes. It was in her refusal to disappear. The green-eyed girl had come to understand why her father left, and in choosing to stay, she had given the town something he never received, the chance to truly see.